You are the light of the world, Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount. And if we are the light, we should not be hiding it. Instead, Jesus says we're to let our light shine so that others might see our good works and give thanks to God the Father. What does this mean for us to be the light of the world? Certainly when we do good and noble deeds, we're being a light. But we're also being a light when we avoid even appearing to do what is wrong. This requires a balancing act because at the same time, we are called to take risk to reach out to others, to help others. Just as the Samaritan took a risk to help that wounded man that was lying on the road. But when possible, we also need to avoid things that might cause others to question our motives. And we're going to explore this concept today. We watch Paul tack back and forth between topics throughout our exploration of 2 Corinthians. And last week we began to explore the 2 chapters that are devoted to fundraising for the saints in Jerusalem. Today, in the middle of this section, we discover a lull in action as Paul takes care of some details. While Paul often wrote about theological issues, he also had a practical mind. I mean, there were things that just had to be done, and he did them. Things need to happen for any organization to run well. And here Paul makes sure there's a way to receive the collection and to get the help to those who are in need. Furthermore, Paul wants to be totally upfront about the collection. He doesn't want the Corinthians to have questions. Instead, he wants to assure them that their gifts will be handled properly and will be used for the reason that they've been collected. Finally, Paul wants to avoid any embarrassment to himself and to the Corinthians. So let's listen as I read from 2 Corinthians, the 8th chapter, beginning with the 16th verse. And I will read through the 9th chapter and the 5th verse. But thanks be to God, who put in the heart of Titus the same eagerness for you that I have myself. For he not only accepted our appeal, but since he is more eager than ever, he is going to you on his own accord. With him we are sending the brother who is famous among all the churches for his proclaiming the good news. And not only that, but he has also been appointed by the churches to travel with us while we are ministering this generous undertaking for the glory of the Lord himself and to show our goodwill. We intend that no one should blame us about this generous gift that we are administering. For we intend to do what is right, not only in the Lord's sight, but also in the sight of others. And with them, we are sending our brother, whom we have often tested and found eager in many manners, but who is now more eager than ever because of his great confidence in you. As for Titus, he is my partner and co-worker in your service. As for the brothers, we are messengers of the churches, the glory of Christ. Therefore, openly before the churches, show them proof of your love and of our reason for boasting about you. Now, it is not necessary for me to write to you about the ministry to the saints, for I know your eagerness, which is the subject of my boasting about you to the people of Macedonia, saying that Arcadia has already been ready since last year, and your zeal has stirred up most of them. But I am sending the brothers in order that our boasting about you may not prove to have been empty in this case, so that you may be ready, as I said you would be. Otherwise, if some Macedonians come with me and find that you are not ready, we would be humiliated, to say nothing of you, in this undertaking. So I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to go on ahead to you and arrange in advance for this bountiful gift that you have promised, so that it may be ready as a voluntary gift and not as an exhortation. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It's an old joke that being a pastor requires 1 hour of work on Sunday. Of course, if I got up here without any kind of preparation or planning, you would know it. Being a pastor involves a lot more than just talking 20 minutes on Sunday morning. It's hard for one person to do all the administrative work that's required. In our Presbyterian systems, pastors who also moderate the session or the church board are assisted by a clerk of session, to help with the details. Furthermore, the entire session is called on to lead the congregation. And when this system works, it makes the calling of a pastor a lot less stressful. Of course, when a church begins to grow and it begins to move into, say, a program-sized congregation, it takes even more help. It's good then to have a competent secretary who makes sure all the details are covered. And Marcy was such a person. She was hired first as a church secretary and over time became my administrative assistant when I was the pastor in Cedar City, Utah. She was not the best typist. I could type faster than her. But she was very capable of taking care of business and of helping me during a very busy period of time in my ministry, because while I was there, the church expanded greatly and we built a new campus. Marcy amazed me. She was always pleasant, even to those who could be difficult. She listened, and she kept me informed on what people were thinking and saying, and identified for me needs within the church. And when it was time to move on, I knew that I was going to miss Marcy the most from that congregation, and I did. But to her credit, she faithfully served another 3 pastors at Community Presbyterian Church. And in all those years, she was kind of the glue that held that congregation together. Marcy was at that church for 25 years. She only stepped down once cancer got the best of her, but by the time she stepped down, the church was in a much better place for someone else to come in and to take over. Sadly, Marcy died 6 months after I moved here up on the mountain. But during the many years between my leaving Utah and her death, we kept in touch. And often when I would go back and visit, it would be like I had never been gone. We would laugh and we would joke back and forth. And it felt good to be with her again. In this lull in the middle of Paul's second epistle to the Corinthians, I find myself wondering if Paul didn't need a Marcy. Paul takes care of business, and in doing so, he reminds us that even the little details are a part of godly work. In a way, by Paul taking care of business, he shows the importance of such work and reminds us that we should be thankful for people like our clerk of session, the treasurer, the one who prepares the bulletins, the ones who clean those who prepare the fellowship opportunities, as well as others who take on those little jobs that need to be done in order for things to run smoothly. Paul sends Titus back to Corinth to collect the offering. With him is an unnamed brother who's obviously held in high esteem by the churches, or so it appears. Many scholars have speculated on just who was this unnamed brother, but that doesn't really matter for our purposes. What matters is that Paul takes care not just to meet this need, but to do so in a way that is going to avoid any suspicion that the offering might not go to where it is intended. Paul shows the importance not only of doing what is right, but in doing it in a manner that will not raise red flags or call into question one's motives. The early church was constantly under scrutiny. Jews questioned the church's relationship with the Gentile community. Pagans even went as far as to accuse Christians of being atheists because they didn't believe in the gods, but only the one God. And cannibals because of the words that were used in the institution of the Lord's Supper. In such an environment, Paul wants to do everything he can to avoid giving his critics some ammo with which they can attack the fledgling church. You know, when you are under suspicion to start with, and anyone who is in leadership is and probably should be under suspicion, it is important not to give others more reason to criticize you. Others will find plenty of reasons to criticize you on their own. I remember once approaching a respected judge who was a member of a church that I pastored. We were asking him to serve on the building finance committee, and I am sure this man would have done an incredible job. But he politely turned us down, and in fact, I learned that this judge refused to be involved in any fundraising activities, not just in the church, but also in the community. He did not want to be in a position where someone who gave through a request that he made would later ask for a favor when they were in front of a court of law. And I had to respect his decision. And I was grateful that he continued to teach our high school Sunday school class. I wish more of our politicians would take such a high road. As for the judge, I was kind of sad that it was when he retired and resumed part-time law practice, that I was no longer the pastor there, because I would have gone back to him then and asked him to serve on the finance committee. But you know, even our good deeds can be misinterpreted, and that's a risk that we always take. But if there's a way to keep from such misinterpretations, we should do so. We should strive to take the high road and to do what is noble in the eyes of others, always going beyond what is required, not just to avoid impropriety, but also the appearance of such. Yet, as in the case of the collection for the saints, we must also take a risk that's for the benefit of others. John Calvin places our desire to avoid even the appearance of wrongdoing within the rule of law. We owe this to others, he writes, even to strangers, so that they might be drawn into the faith. In other words, by striving to always be above board, that becomes one way that we express our love to others. As we move into the 9th chapter, Paul returns to the offering. He again restates what he said earlier, bringing up the Macedonians' offering and how he has bragged about Corinth and what Corinth was doing and the zeal that Corinth has. This section could be taken two ways. Is Paul playing the Macedonian church off against the Corinthian church? Or is Paul really concerned about humiliating the Corinthians and himself, which would happen if they fail to live up to their expectations? Or perhaps Paul is doing a little bit of both. After all, avoiding humiliation of others does go with Paul's desire to make everything seem proper. As a good administrator, which it appears is a talent of Paul's, he wants to see the Corinthian church complete the work that they've begun. Although the proverb, "the road to hell is paved with good intentions," does not appear in Scripture, it might be applied here. Paul has bragged about Corinth. Now he wants them to live up to his praise. While this section of Paul's writing might not be the most theological significant section within Paul's works, there are several things that we can learn. First, when involved in church work, we need to take care of the details. And for those of us who may be a more big picture type, we need to honor those who watch over and help us make sure that everything has been taken care of. Second, we need to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Let's not give anyone a reason to avoid associating with us or with the church. Paul does what he can to relate to everyone. And finally, when we make a commitment, we should do our best to complete the work. Amen.